Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for the day today. Pray that you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, a lot to talk about today. It's one of these, we just wish that President Trump would take a day off and go play golf. And I think you said last week, it's like, I hate to be away from my phone for a few hours because I feel like I missed 5 days of news. So there's a lot going on. So I'm going to talk about, is this the plan today? Because there's a lot of talk about what Trump had to say with Prime Minister Netanyahu about a plan in Gaza. Read a little scripture with that to put it into context. Remind me to do that if I forget, from Zephaniah. But just an update. So there will be a Prophecy Roundtable on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. with Patrick Woodbridge Gillette, Scott Townsend, and Pete Garcia on technocracy, transhumanism, AI. You might have noticed there's a few things going on in that space as well. So we'll do that Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then Thursday morning at 10 a.m., I'm going to do a Israel Zionism and anti-Semitism roundtable with Brian Schrager, Dexter Van Zyl from the Middle East Forum, and Jim Fletcher, who a lot of you know. So if you have time to get that, if not, they'll be on YouTube later. So let's talk about, if I could spin this as like a crazy top, I would be spinning it. There's a lot of things going on. And remember, let me make just sort of a preliminary comment. I don't know how to say this in a kind way. I think there's too many people planting their flag too soon on certain aspects of Bible prophecy. And there's a number, and I get email, believe me, if you should see my emails. So, and some of these are ones that I have not reached the same conclusion on. And I don't think we know for sure yet. That's my opinion. And I could be wrong. So, for example, one of those would be that Trump is the Antichrist. And you can't convince people. I've also learned there's a new principle of life that I try to follow, but I violate several times a week, is that nobody ever wins an argument on social media. And it's kind of interesting. So, for example, this week, somebody who believes that Trump is probably the Antichrist goes into the passage in Daniel chapter 11 where it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south. And the king of the north comes into the land. So that's Trump. He's coming into the land. He's taking over Gaza and that type of thing. So they're saying that that's who Trump is. And then you'll see that Saudi Arabia opposes the plan in Gaza. So that's the king of the south, and Saudi Arabia is south of Israel. And some parts of that may be true, but I'm just saying, I think it's too early to plant that flag yet. And then I get a lot of emails about America is Babylon. America is Babylon. So I'll just make a couple comments on that. First of all, America deserves judgment because of the things that we've done, just as about every other country on earth deserves judgment for the things that were done. And if you don't think that God might judge America, I think you're not being realistic about the situation. If God judges America, things will change, and you should prepare for that. Now, the Bible does say in the passages related to Babylon, flee, come out of her, my people, flee. And I get a lot of people writing me saying, America's Babylon, John, America's Babylon, John, but they're still here. I don't so if you want to have that conclusion, that's fine. You can make the case for it. I'm not going to argue with you about it. And the fact that maybe I don't agree with you that America is Babylon does not believe that I think that America is deserving of God's judgment, which would include believers within it. So make appropriate preparations for that because it could be very difficult. And I don't think that Trump being elected president has slowed anything down. In fact, I think it's probably speeded it up quite a bit on the prophetic scale. That's why I say this thing should be spinning like a top. And for that. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on. Now, there's a couple interesting articles in the Jerusalem Post that I want to bring to your attention. This is from Thursday. Israel's concern of facing a multi-front war. And so what's going on in Israel to some extent right now is people are going back and they're looking at the things that have happened back around October 7th. And why did we do what we did after October 7th? Why did we not go after Hezbollah right away and that type of thing? And Israel was concerned. They didn't know exactly how things were going to unfold. As we now know that the plan that Hamas had was they planned that Hezbollah would join them and Hezbollah come from the north, Hamas from the south, and they would meet in Tel Aviv. And the plans were for 100 or for 1 million Israelis to be killed, kidnapped, hostage, or whatever. Now, they have had a lot of Israelis displaced, probably over 100,000 between the areas along the Israel border and also along the Israel-Gaza border and also along the Lebanon border. And some of those, and they're encouraging, I think, people to return to the north, but people are a little bit skeptical and they want to see how it's going. So I would highly recommend you get this article by Yoni Jeremy Bob at Jerusalem Post. And then Seth Frantzman also wrote a pretty good article that appeared, I think, in Friday's Jerusalem Post. Was the war on Hezbollah a game changer? So just to recap, Israel's had tremendous success. Not complete success, but they've had a number of successes over the past year and 4 months. But not complete, of course. They took out a lot of the Hezbollah leadership. They took out all of the Hamas leadership, except maybe one guy. Hamas came out this week and admitted that Mohammed Deif had been killed in an attack. They had not really admitted that, but they finally did. And so they got Hania from Hamas was killed in Tehran. Then they got Nasrallah. So they've got a lot of success, and that, I think, that success led to a ceasefire in Lebanon. And I think I don't know how to describe them. Somebody described them this week as neo-Al-Qaeda, who's taken over Syria. They took over Syria because they figured, well, all of the Iranian allies, Hezbollah and the Assad regime, they're all vulnerable. So they took over. And I think those rebels in Syria acted with the full support of Turkey. So it's, and by the way, I may mention this later on, the people who took over Syrian government are now attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. So, and wait a minute, you're thinking like they're all Muslims, right? Yeah, but if you understand the history of the Middle East, it's tribal and they don't get along very well. So let's look a little bit about what happened at the White House this week. This was also, and I'll get to this in a moment, the hostages released, the male hostages released, and I'm not sure how that got put in here. Hang on a second here. I copied my slides at the last minute, and I must have copied the wrong ones. I'm sorry. Yeah. The dog ate my PowerPoints. So, okay. So this There's a very annoying feature in PowerPoint. It keeps asking me to record subtitles. It's like every 2 weeks it pops up right in the middle, of course, only when I'm doing this. So anyway, so Trump had a news conference with Netanyahu. Netanyahu came to the White House. Netanyahu was accompanied by his new international affairs advisor, Carolyn Glick. They were at the White House. I think Trump references her in the clip that I have played. And Trump just said, listen, everybody needs to get out of Gaza. We're going to rebuild Gaza. It's going to be big, beautiful Gaza. And, his usual description of things. And so Netanyahu was standing there. Now, I don't know how much of this was planned in advance. You see some of the pictures of people in the room at the press conference. They're looking a little bit surprised. And I don't know. Well, I'll play what Trump said, an extended clip. And then you can decide whether it's a negotiating ploy or it's something he actually means when he says we're going to own Gaza. Does he mean we're going to own it as a piece of real estate, or does it mean we're going to own what happens to it? That's done. And so he's, these are reports everywhere. He's doubled down on this. The people at the Financial Times, Trump's takeover proposal for Gaza condemned by U.S. allies across the world. Trump doubles down on his reckless plan for Gaza. So let's look a little bit at the news conference that took place last Tuesday evening in Washington. Or Monday evening. Tuesday evening. Oh, by the way, I believe that before this news conference on Monday night, I have been told that Trump saw the Israeli government has prepared a 47-minute video of what happened on October 7th. They have not released that to the public. It's under the control of Prime Minister Netanyahu's office. I've checked to try to get a copy of it, and they said, well, if you come to Israel, maybe you can watch it, at a secure location. They're not releasing it out of respect for the families that are involved. And I understand that. But everybody that I know that has seen it has been impacted very, very strongly by what they've seen. You cannot watch what happened, their own video, Hamas's own videos, and the people from Gaza videoed everything. And so they've boiled that down to about 47 minutes. And my understanding is President Trump was able to see that the other day, and it may have led to some changes in his thinking. He sort of is I view him as sort of a free thinker, that he doesn't necessarily clear everything with like other people in advance. He just kind of goes free form. So here's the first part of the news conference, and then he's going to get into his plan for Gaza.
We have, in addition, Marco Rubio, who is on the phone right now, listening to every single word that we say, and he's going to be great. And Pete, congratulations. And Scott, congratulations. I see you're here. And Caroline's been doing a great job. She's really probably talked about more than anybody here. She's done a fantastic job, and thank you very much, Caroline. We're proud of you.
He's referring to his press secretary.
We'll only be satisfied when all of these problems are solved, and we have the team to solve them, and that's going to happen. And it's going to happen, I think, very quickly. I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades, and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good, and it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all. With the same goal in mind, my administration has been moving quickly to restore trust in the alliance and rebuild American strength throughout the region. And we've really done that. We're a respected nation again. A lot's happened in the last couple of weeks. We are actually a very respected nation again. I ended the last administration's de facto arms embargo on over $1 billion in military assistance for Israel. And I'm also pleased to announce that this afternoon, the United States withdrew from the anti-Semitic UN Human Rights Council and ended all of the support for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which funneled money to Hamas and which was very disloyal to humanity. Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world. We had no threat when I left office. Iran was not able to sell oil. Nobody was buying oil because I said, don't buy it. If you buy it, you're not doing any business with the United States. And Hamas was not being funded. Hezbollah was not being funded. Nobody was being funded. There would never have been an October 7th. 2 weeks ago, I once again designated the Houthis as a terrorist organization. They're trying to destroy world shipping lanes, and that's not going to happen. And over the weekend, I ordered airstrikes against senior ISIS leaders hiding in the caves of Somalia and took them out. Here in America, we've begun the process of deporting foreign terrorists, jihadists, and Hamas sympathizers from our soil, just as we have people that are extremely evil, and we're sending them out of our country. They came from jails. They came from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they were dumped into our country. They're gang members. We're getting them out at numbers that nobody can actually believe. And every single country is taking those people back. They said they would never take them back, and they're all taking them back, and they're taking them back very gladly. And I recently signed an executive order combating the vile wave of anti-Semitism that we've seen in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. Together, America and Israel will renew the optimism that shined so brightly just 4 years ago. It was really a bright, beautiful light. We will restore calm and stability to the region and expand prosperity, opportunity, and hope to our nations and for all people in the Middle East, including the Arab and Muslim nations. Very important. We want the Arab and Muslim nations to have peace and have tranquility and have great lives. I'd like to now invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to say a few words, and we'll take some questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored that you invited me to be the first foreign leader to visit the White House in your second term. This is a testament to your friendship and support for the Jewish state and the Jewish people. I've said this before, I'll say it again. You are the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. And that's why the people of Israel have such enormous respect for you. In your first term, you recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. You moved the American embassy there. You recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. You withdrew from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. I remember we spoke about it. You said, this is the worst deal I've ever seen. I'm elected, I'm walking out of it. That's exactly what you did. And I think it speaks loudly for just common sense, just looking at things and seeing them as they are. And of course, you also brokered the groundbreaking Abraham Accords in which Israel made peace with 4 Arab states. We did this in 4 months. Nothing happened for a quarter of a century, but in 4 months, we were able, working together under your leadership, to have 4 historic peace accords. And now in the first days of your second term, you picked up right where you left off. Your leadership helped bring our hostages home, among them American citizens. You freed up munitions that have been withheld from Israel. They had been withheld from Israel in the midst of a 7-front war for our existence. And you just freed it. You ended unjust sanctions against law-abiding Israeli citizens. You boldly confronted the scourge of anti-Semitism. You stopped funding, as you just said, international organizations like UNRWA that support and fund terrorists. And today, you renewed the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, all this in just 2 weeks. Can we imagine where we'll be in 4 years? I can. I know you can, Mr. President.
So what have you all done in the last 2 weeks? It raises a whole lot of issues. So this plan for Palestine, I want to find, let me see if I can find it. There was a question asked. Yeah, I'm not finding it. There's a question asked about, Mr. Trump, how can you say take over a sovereign country? This is a sovereign country. So let me just dispel the notion. Gaza's not a country. Okay, this has been a problem forever. And there's all sorts of great Twitter things out there. I have some people talking about it later and some clips. It's not a country. And so here's the situation. When Israel went into Gaza after October 7th, the day, I remember this very well, the day after October 7th, everybody in the world was talking, okay, Israel, what's your plan for the day after Hamas? And I think Netanyahu was correct at the time, and he said, we'll deal with that in time. Right now, we have to go rescue our hostages and take care of Hamas. Now, they don't have all the hostages back. We saw that this week. There will be more coming this week. Talk about that in just a minute. And they haven't finished Hamas. Hamas has reconstituted itself to a great degree. So the job is not done. But a few months after October 7th, I think it was about March or April, Netanyahu came out with a plan. And the plan was, it was a PowerPoint slide deck, and it was Gaza 2035. So I'm going to go through with it. They came out with a plan. But when I go through this, I want you to see the various elements that relate to the Abraham Accords, the things that Jared Kushner has said, to things that other people have said, and then sort of putting it in the context of Trump, maybe viewing this as a giant, big, beautiful real estate deal to do. And then there's also a lot of misconceptions. So, and there's a lot of anti-Semitism that's risen up about this. I want to reiterate this, and I do not remember if I made this. I do a lot of interviews, so I don't remember where I make various points. So if you've heard it, ignore it. But I did some research because they're talking about genocide. Israel's been committing a genocide of the Palestinians for 70 years. So when all of this started, the Arab population of Israel was a few 100,000 people. Now it's about, between Gaza and the Palestinians in Israel and the Palestinians in the areas of Judea and Samaria, also called the West Bank, there's probably 4.5 million, maybe 5 million Arabs. And I'm just saying, is if Israel's committing genocide, they're the worst people at it ever. Another thing I was researching, because I do a lot of work on demographics, because I think this is really changing the world. China is just in desperate shape demographically. Japan is. Europe is getting there. Russia, Ukraine. The populations are collapsing all over the world. And that leads me to believe that things that we see happen in Bible prophecy might happen more quickly because countries want to put their legacy in place. So China's population, you see it at 1.4 billion. Now it's really, they will say, well, it's really about 1.2 billion. And then other people are looking at it and say, no, it might only be 800 million. But they've built stuff, so many buildings, and so it's collapsing their economy and everything. So I look at the demographics of Gaza. Do you know Save the Children, which is a left-wing organization, I think it's a favorite of Oprah, but they've analyzed Gaza. So I'm just going to give you what they said about Gaza. In the 9 months after October 7th, how many babies do you think were born in Gaza? 50,000. Now, a lot of people have trouble processing that. So there's a lot of things. You've got to look at the facts when you look at these things. So here's the slide deck of the presentation or plan that Netanyahu published back February, March, about a year ago for Gaza. A plan for Gaza. The day after Gaza, they were actually making plans for it. Now, immediately, a lot of people say, oh, look, it's one of those 15-minute cities. Well, Gaza's not that big anyway. I think it's about 40 miles from north to south, and it's only a few miles, maybe 6-7 miles wide at its widest point. But they plan to build. I'm going to go through the slides. So here you go. Here's the slide, and it says, from crisis to prosperity. And it's very interesting when you see the common language used. Remember Trump's vision released 5 years ago, just 5 years ago, the end of January, for his peace plan that Jared Kushner had put together. It was called Peace and Prosperity. So you see the same common language over and over again. So when I look at it, I don't know, but it seems like they're all working together on this, and they all have a kind of a common goal. And so that's why I titled this, Is This the Plan? And so crisis to prosperity, a plan for transformation of the Gaza Strip from an Iranian dragoon to a moderate axis. So the plan is to transform it politically, socially, culturally, and I don't know that that happens with the people that live there. I'm sorry. I just don't know how. So they have this plan. They have the goal. Gaza thrives as part of an Abrahamic regional architecture. What was one of the things near the end of the Trump administration in 2020, September 15th, 2020? They had a big ceremony on the White House lawn, on the area just outside the Oval Office. And what did they talk about? The Abraham Accords that they were signing. So a regional Abrahamic architecture. So you see I want you to see the common language that's used. Then the risk. The risk was Gaza is an Iranian outpost that disrupts the moderate regional architecture, sabotages the emerging supply chains from India through the Gaza Strip to Europe, and thwarts any future Palestinian political hope. Now remember, Netanyahu went to the UN in the end of September, near the end of September 2023. And he said, we're going to have this big trade route from India through Saudi Arabia, Israel, Mediterranean, onto Europe. Remember the pictures? He held them up. A couple days before that, Mohammed bin Salman went on Bret Baier on Fox News and said, we are on the verge of transforming the Middle East. And all indications were they were very, very close to a normalization agreement. That may have prompted Hamas to say, we can't allow that to happen, because if Saudi Arabia comes into this thing, there's no indication that they're going to do anything for us. They always give us lip service, but nothing ever happens. So we're going to do something about it. And it was not 2 weeks later that October 7th happened. And Hamas was an Iranian outpost, funded by Iran, supplied through Egypt, through the Rafah crossing, and elsewhere through these tunnels. And I think when Trump's talking with Netanyahu, one of the concerns I have is who's doing anything about those tunnels? For crying out loud, guys, go blow up the Rafah crossing and the tunnels there. Just obliterate them. Go blow up all the tunnels. Now, part of the reason is Israel has a limited supply of munitions. That's changing this week, as we'll see. And then the other thing is the opportunity. Gaza prospered in the past as a crossroads between, and this is kind of interesting when you talk about biblical history and some of the names in biblical history and in biblical prophecy. Gaza prospered in the past as a crossroads between two ancient trade routes, the sea routes, Egypt, Gaza, Babylon, and the perfume route, India, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Europe. It can return and thrive in the center of moderate regional architecture. And then it goes on to say, it talks about crisis to prosperity, building self-governance in Gaza. And the plan there talked about for 5 to 10 years, there would be a multilateral body that would come from different political factions. Israel reserves the right to act against security threats. I don't see how they can ever not have that right. Arab countries transfer power in Gaza to a Gazan or unified Palestinian government. And now what we learn is that the Palestinian government is corrupt beyond belief. They transfer money through USAID. There's so many issues that sort of converge in this. USAID is funding this. I saw an Israeli realtor saying on Route 60 between Jerusalem and Hebron, there's a lot of people. I mean, I have friends that live in Efrat. They live in the area of Judea called the West Bank. There's no fence between them and Palestinian mosque and radical terrorism. They're building luxury condos along Route 60. And my understanding is those are going to be given to the people that you see being released from prison in the hostage exchanges. And by the way, they've released a number of these. I don't know how many dozen they've released so far. 33 or 34 of them have already been detained again for what you're doing. And you see them come out of prison and they say, I'm going to go kill the first Jew I see. And they get a rifle and they're running around. And they're not in Gaza. They're in Judea, Samaria, and this is very difficult. I did do an interview with Hillel Fold. I'm going to put it up sometime this week. I just haven't had time to edit it. He's the brother of Ari Fold, who was killed just down the street at the Gush Etzion Junction from the area of Efrat where his family lived. He just went down to the store and he got stabbed in the back. Severed his aorta. That was 6 years ago. It's hard to believe it's been that long. So this is another one. Then they talk about the fact that they have to do debris clearance. They're talking about the fact just to clear the debris currently in Gaza will take 2 to 3 years. It'll take another 5 to 10 years to build. How are people going to live there during that period of time? Because you have all kinds of infrastructure issues. We don't think about it, but we go home and we turn on the tap. Or let's say the electricity goes out for 15 seconds. What happens at your house when the electricity goes out for 15 seconds? What's going on? Is it ever coming back on? Are we ever going to have power again? You're running, the internet's down. Oh my goodness, and it always does it like right when I'm in the middle of finishing prep for something, it seems like. But imagine not having any of that. There's a couple things you learn from that. Is one, the human ability for survival is pretty impressive because people can live in a tent and that type of thing. And that's why we always talk, at least my perspective is, I don't do camping things, Remember the Adult Bible Fellowship we used to be at, they would go, hey, we're going camping this weekend. It's like, good, I'll see you when you get back. You don't like to camp? No. I said it's the whole struggle of human civilization has been to rise above camping. And I don't want to go back. I'm not that kind of guy. So I get upset. I used to tell PM, I get upset when the batteries are low on the remote control for the TV. So, and then there's all kinds of plans, and it's going to involve Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar. All these people are going to involve the United States, Israel. Then you have, the Jordan government. You have the Palestinian Authority, and you have, of course, I think when this was written, it had the Syria flag there, and that flag has changed. It has 3 stars now instead of 2. And then they have all these things. They talk about the trade routes. And it's interesting, the Houthis down in Yemen at the southern end of the Arabian Peninsula have disrupted greatly the shipping in the Red Sea. I don't know how many missiles they have. They have enough that they've disrupted it. And my concern, by the way, there's other proposals. So the proposal that they had discussed at the UN back in September was that they would have this trade route going up the Persian Gulf, which I guess they assumed that the Iranians would be under control by then, and across Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, to the Mediterranean, and then on to Europe. But my point is, or my concern with that is, if they can disrupt the sea shipping lanes, they can disrupt rail lines and canals and that type of thing. So, and it's interesting, this plan also had a rail line from Beersheba. You see it here, it's kind of sideways. Beersheba to Neom, the big city that Mohammed bin Salman is building. Now, how big that city is ever going to be is anybody's guess, but they're still working on it. They're taking up a big supply of the world's steel is going into that project. So and now look at this picture. This is a picture of what they envision Gaza looking like in 2035. And it looks like Dubai, doesn't it? It looks like Dubai and Qatar. Actually, here's another picture. And some people are suggesting, too, there's a theory out there that they're going to build this thing called the Ben Gurion Canal. I think I've talked about that. The Ben Gurion Canal, this was an idea that some guy floated back in 1963, and it's in my view, it's garbage. They talked about setting off like 50 nuclear explosions in Israel to dig the canal from the Red Sea at Eilat to the Mediterranean at Ashkelon. Now, do you think they're going to explode nuclear weapons in the world like that, in that area of the world, anywhere in the world, to dig a canal? It's just not a viable idea. Plus, it'll cost $100 billion. And Egypt maybe nets $5 billion a year from the Suez Canal tolls. So if Israel would get half of that would only be $2.5 billion. So you're going to spend $100 billion to get $2.5 billion. I just don't think it makes economic sense. But as Trump would say, it's big, beautiful property, it's beachfront property, and you can put golf courses and fields. And by the way, there used to be a big Jewish community in Gaza, and they had all kinds of very high-tech greenhouses. They were pressured. Our government pressured Ariel Sharon to have them leave in 2005. And they did. They were drug out of their homes, about 11,000 Jews. To get rid of the Jews in Gaza. So Gaza had to be Jew-free. Do you understand? And you go over the Arab world, the Jews left all countries in the Arab world to come to Israel. And now everybody's saying, you need to go back where you came from, but nobody would take them back anywhere. So you know what they want to do. They want to eradicate them. But this Ben Gurion Canal plan, I know it's floated out there, but it's usually done by anti-Semites to say, yep, Israel's just about the money. We know how those people are. And I just think it's just not a viable plan. And so this is the plan. Now, look, Dubai took 30 years to build. I don't know that this gets done in 15 years, even if it was going to be followed through on. Look at this. This is another picture. So it sort of looks like a combination of Dubai and Miami Beach. But it's what the plans for Gaza are or will be. This is not really anything new. 20 years ago, everybody's referring to Gaza as potentially the Singapore of the Mediterranean. I'm sure you've heard that phrase. So don't say that Trump or Netanyahu just dreamed this up out of nothing to control things. That's not what happened. This has been in people's minds for a very, very long time. Now, so I want to go back. The architect of the Abraham Accords, to a large extent, was Jared Kushner. He also was the architect of the Peace and Prosperity Plan that was released in January 2020. In the morning of that day, in the afternoon, Charlie Vector broke loose. I think there's a direct connection between the two. Bill Caney talks about that a lot. So here is about 11 months ago, Jared Kushner went to Harvard School of Government, funded by the local guy over in New Albany, Epstein's friend. The leadership school there, heavily funded by the guy over there. And so he talked about Gaza. So this is about a 6-minute clip, but I think you need to listen to it. So here's Jared Kushner about 11 months ago at Harvard.
Do you have a proposal or an idea or a sketch for how we end this crisis?
Sure. So I think the dilemma that Israeli leadership has right now is, do you do a short-term deal that leaves you more vulnerable in the future, or do you take this current situation and try to figure out a way where you can create a paradigm where your citizens will be safe and this will not happen again? So it's a very, very tough dilemma to be faced with if you are the leader of a country. So what I would do right now if I was Israel is I would try to say, number one, you want to get as many civilians out of Rafah as possible. I think that you want to try to clear that out. I know that with diplomacy, maybe you get them into Egypt. I know that that's been refused, but with the right diplomacy, I think it would be possible. But in addition to that, the thing that I would try to do if I was Israel right now is I would just bulldoze something in the Negev. I would try to move people in there. I know that won't be the popular thing to do, but I think that that's a better option to do so that you can go in and finish the job. I think there was one decision point they had. Do we go into Gaza? Do we not go into Gaza? They had the hostages. There really was, I think, no choice but to do that. I think that they were smart to go slowly and deliberately. Gaza's booby-trapped like crazy. They have over 400 miles of underground tunnels. And so I think that they've taken some of the right steps in order to go there. But you have to, again, I think Israel's gone way more out of their way than a lot of other countries would to try to protect civilians from casualties. But I do think right now opening up the Negev, creating a secure area there, moving the civilians out, and then going in and finishing the job would be the right move.
Is that something that they're talking about in Israel? I mean, that's the first I've really heard of somebody, aside from President Sisi, suggesting that that the Gazans who are trying to flee the fighting could take refuge in the Negev. Are people in Israel seriously talking about that possibility, about hosting Gazan refugees in what is considered, quote unquote, Israel proper?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but that would be something you would try to work on.
I'm sitting in Miami Beach right now, and I'm looking at this situation, and I'm just thinking, what would I do if I was there? And again, you look at, I mean, with Israel, it's a different thing, right? In Syria, when there's refugees, Turkey took them, Europe took them, Jordan took them. For whatever reason, here in Gaza, there's refugees from the fighting, from an offensive attack that was staged from Gaza. Israel's going in to do, a long-term deterrence mission. And it's unfortunate that nobody's taking the refugees. Again, I think that the American government should probably have done a little bit of a better job to find a solution to that. As a broker, I think that there would have been a way. But if that's not a viable option, I think from Israel's perspective, it's just something that should be strongly considered.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the reason they're not, for example, the reason the Egyptians don't want to take the refugees, in addition to, of course, there being the domestic unrest that could result, or the instability that could result, but also there are real fears on the part of Arabs, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of them, who think once Gazans leave Gaza, Netanyahu's never going to let them back in.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. So, if you think about even the construct, like, Gaza was not really a historical precedent, right? It was the result of a war, right? You had tribes that were in different places, but then Gaza became a thing. Egypt, used to run it. And then, over time, you had different governments that came in different ways. So you have another war, usually when wars happen, borders are changed historically over time. And so my sense is I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt, right? I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up, livelihoods. You think about all the money that's gone into this tunnel network and into all the munitions. If that would have gone into education or innovation, what could have been done? And so I think that it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up. But I don't think that Israel has stated that they don't want the people to move back there afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, okay, there's a lot to talk about there. The last thing I wanted to just get your reaction to on this is the, you saw Tom Friedman's column on Tuesday.
Okay, well, he goes on, and I don't remember if he said it yet in this clip, but he says we should just bulldoze part of the Negev. Did he say that? Okay, bulldoze part of the Negev, and they can live there. And if you remember back to his peace and prosperity plan, there was a Negev enclave set aside as a economic development zone for Gaza. So do you see the integration between the Netanyahu plan and Kushner and all this stuff? So I believe Kushner was making these statements at Harvard before Netanyahu released his plan. And then I see things like Beersheba Neom, and it's sort of like in the background, you wonder if Kushner's working on this and Mohammed bin Salman's working on this and Netanyahu's working on this and Trump's working on this, which, by the way, when you watch what's going on in our government, it appears that Trump's sort of been sitting around he's not been sitting around playing golf the last 4 years. He's sort of been making some plans to execute them with some rapidity. It's kind of stunning to watch. So Israel Katz said, listen, I want Anybody who wants to leave Gaza can leave Gaza. We got to do a plan for this. And people in the region are freaking out. This is a tweet last night. This also was in the Jerusalem Post this overnight. There is panic among the Arab dictatorships surrounding Israel, driven by President Trump's unwavering confidence in his plan to relocate Gazans to their territories, Jordan and Egypt. Egypt doesn't want them. They're Muslim Brotherhood. What happened in Muslim Brotherhood at the behest of, or in Egypt, the behest of Barack Obama? A Muslim Brotherhood revolution that they had to deal with for a year. It was horrible, and they fought to get those people out. They put them in prison. Do you think that ideology went away? It's still there, and so al-Sisi's doing. So it says, Sisi, overwhelmed with anxiety, has hastily arranged an Arab summit in Cairo on February 27th to address the issue. However, by that time, both he and Jordan's monarch will be in the White House, where the decisive discussions will take place. And King Abdullah II of Jordan is supposed to be in Washington, D.C. to meet with Trump this week. Al-Sisi is coming. Netanyahu is the first foreign leader to come. Things are going to unfold rapidly, and there was a question at the news conference, what's your plan for the areas of Judea and Samaria and settlements by Israel in those areas? And Trump said, we'll have something definitive on that within the next 4 weeks. And then Caroline Leavitt came out, and she's kind of a beast in the way she conducts her press conferences. I kind of enjoy it. It's kind of an entertaining thing to watch. And these news organizations they're just like freaking out. They don't know what to do. And now some of their funding is being cut off. It's like I said, there's a delicious aspect to this. To see justice. So observers note that the Arab rulers are under unprecedented pressure, realizing their usual games are no longer viable. From U.S. perspective, Egypt has lost its strategic significance. Trump has little interest in continuing financial support, and both the Egyptians and the broader Arab world are acutely aware of this. If Egypt refuses to accommodate 1.8 million Gazans, the consequences for its own population could be severe. And by the way, they're massing tanks on the border. I've seen pictures of them Egyptian troops coming out of tunnels in the Negev and the Sinai. They're planning for something. And I don't know if they're going to attack Israel. I think they're trying to defend themselves against Gaza because nobody wants them, right? So Israel Katz says this, the people of Gaza should have the right to freedom of movement and migration, as is customary everywhere in the world. Now, Khomeini came out and said, no, all of Palestine from the river to the sea belongs to the Palestinian people. Lee Smith has a great article over at Tablet Magazine. He's a great writer. He's one that I think you should follow. Pretty smart on the Middle East. And he wrote about the end of Palestine. Yeah, what Trump did was he sort of put a nail in the coffin of Palestine this week. Listen to this. Yesterday, President Trump single-handedly collapsed the most destructive idea of the last 100 years, Palestine. During meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli officials, Trump said he was going to move 1.7 million Palestinians out of Gaza, and just like that, he broke the long spell that had captured generations of world leaders, peace activists, and Middle East terror masters alike, who had paradoxically come to regard the repeated failure and haunting secondary consequences of the idea of joint Arab, Muslim, and Jewish statehood in the same small piece of land as proof of its necessity. So, I should have titled this, Is This the Plan? How far in the chaos timeline are we? Because I think that's pretty clear. So Trump came out and he said, well, Saudi Arabia doesn't want a Palestinian state or a Gazans, or no, they need a Palestinian state. There were billboards all over the place this week in Israel. Israel is ready. And what do you see down there? Trump and Mohammed bin Salman shaking hands with the Israel flag in the middle. Kind of interesting. Along the freeway in Tel Aviv, the same billboard. Same billboard in Jerusalem. And then on the mall in Washington was this. the same thing on the side of a billboard truck. So remember, there's this Abraham Shield plan. I talked about that a couple weeks ago, an organization. They're talking about, we got to get this done. We got to get this done. So here's just a little clip. This could go on much longer. You can go watch the whole clip on YouTube. Melanie Phillips at Sky News talking about what's going on.
Yeah, and tell us right up front your thoughts on the Gaza deal. Can it work? Is it the way forward?
I don't know whether Mr. Trump actually means precisely what he has said, or whether he's used it as a kind of leverage in the negotiations he's trying to conduct with Saudi Arabia and other Arab states. If it is true that he means it, it's quite difficult to see how in practice it can be put into practice. But I think that's not really the point. The point is that he's changed the conversation in the right kind of way. And in my view, it needs to be changed still further. The idea that the Gazans need to be moved out is only part of the story. The idea that the Palestinians as such are a cause that is worthy is one that has to be scotched. It is a misapprehension based on a set of historical illusionary facts that are not facts at all, that has actually driven the Middle East into war for the last century, and has in my view, knocked the entire Western liberal intelligentsia off the moral rails completely. There is no such thing as the Palestinian people. The idea of a Palestine state was never wanted by them. It was devised as part of the explicitly named strategy of stages in order to be a staging point in order to destroy Israel. It is based on Islamic holy war to get rid of the Jews, to get rid of Israel as the Jewish homeland, as a precursor to destroying the West civilization and replacing it by Islamic rule. And consequently, the adoption of the Palestine cause has distorted everything. Basically, what's happened for the last 100 years is that the West has rewarded Palestinian genocidal aggression against the state of Israel and against the Jewish people by promises that they will have a state of their own, by telling them in terms that they're entitled to a state of their own. Now, if you're saying that people who are bent on genocide are entitled to something, then you have lost the moral plot completely, and you incentivize more war, more terror, resulting in, what we all saw on October the 7th. An act of unspeakable barbarity and sadism conducted against Jews as Jews, although others than Israeli Jews were involved as well. So this is an essential precursor, in my view, to saying to the Palestinians as a whole, you're over, you're finished. We don't support this cause. We identify now this cause as utterly bogus. You will get nothing from us in future. There is not going to be a state. You are not entitled to a state. You are not entitled to any more funding from us until you stop this campaign of terror and murder against Israel and the Jewish people. You will get no diplomatic recognition from us. Now, this would be an absolute revolution. It's elementary moral and political reality as far as I'm concerned. But the fact is, it is so thoroughly embedded in the whole Western mindset that there is a Palestinian people, there has to be a Palestinian state, that's the route to peace, that it's almost impossible to envisage that happening. What Trump has done by moving the discourse in the way that he has over Gaza, and we've seen the reaction to that, I would hope that's the precursor to some sanity finally emerging over this whole issue.
So, but people, thank the Lord for Melanie Phillips and smart people like her. And she's right. I mean, this is complete nonsense. It's intellectual garbage. It needs to be dealt with. But listen, we also have to look at this in the light of what do we think the prophetic scriptures talk about what's going to happen. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky and confusing, okay? Because if you listen to Turkey says Trump's Gaza takeover ignites backlash. And here's Yeni Sefek, one of Erdogan's mouthpieces. They're talking about it too. Arab News, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia leads rejection of Trump plan of Gaza. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Saudi Arabia came out and issued a statement like, We're not in support of this. We want a Palestinian state. We want a Palestinian state. They referenced back in November 11th that Mohammed bin Salman had come out. Remember that? Remember that video I played of him? It seemed like he was not, it didn't seem like it was him that was saying it. And so I just think when King Salman passes on, it will change. Here's another statement. This is back in November. Of course, they had this big meeting. Israel, Jerusalem Post said the Arab world has a leader and it's not Egypt. And then today, or just the other day, the foreign ministry affirms that Saudi Arabia's position on the establishment of a Palestinian state is firm and unwavering. So the Crown Prince supports this. And then they just came out with another statement, I think just today. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia appreciates the condemnation, disapproval, and total rejection announced by the brotherly countries towards what Benjamin Netanyahu stated regarding the displacement of the Palestinian people from the land. They don't want, this is what they're saying. We don't want them. They're trouble. By the way, if you go through the Arab tribes, the names of the people in Palestine, all their names originate in Jordan, Egypt, Yasser Arafat was Egyptian, and Syria. They were all brought in, and it was created out of whole cloth. In fact, here's a video. This is from memory. This is Muammar Gaddafi speaking at the Arab Summit in Qatar, March 29th, 2008. People here talked about the pre-67 borders. To tell you the truth, this is astounding. Whatever happened to the Palestinian cause we had before 1967? Were we lying to ourselves or to the world? Thousands of martyrs fell before 1967. What for? There was no Palestinian state. And he was going to say, listen, there was Jordan took over that area. They could have made a state of Palestine. Egypt had Gaza. They could have made a state of Palestine, but they never did. And he's going to say, you guys, and they're kind of laughing at him, but he says, listen, memory translates it. Gaza part of Egypt, West Bank part of Jordan. He goes, Israel should sue you guys. And if they did, they'd get billions or trillions of dollars because you fought them for nothing that existed. And now you say there should be a Palestinian state. He also went on to say, and if you guys aren't careful, you're going to end up like Saddam Hussein, who had met his end not too long before this. And then, of course, Gaddafi met his. So this is what originally it was. There was a two-state solution. This was approved back in 1920 to 22, 100 years ago. Jewish Palestine, west of the Jordan, Transjordan, Arab Palestine, east of the Jordan River. That's a two-state solution. And that's very well documented by everybody. Gazans themselves go on. I don't have time to go into it. Go look up Yishai Fleischer. Go look up Yishai Fleischer. He has translated a guy from Gaza saying, we want to go. We want to leave. Let us out of here. Just give us a... He said, in fact, the guy says, if you let us out of here, you'll need like a machine gun stamp for the passports. People will be trying to get through that fast. They're very perceptive. Trump also issued statements on the thing. Of course, this is part of the Trump peace and prosperity plan. And then we've had this release of the hostages. This is the females a week ago. And it's interesting, if you look at these photographs, Israel's gathering tremendous intelligence with these. Look at these pictures, okay? See those guys? Do you not think that Israel has facial recognition software that can tell exactly who those people are that are under those form-fitting balaclavas? They know exactly who was there. So this, yesterday, male hostages released. This was a guy, look at him. This, by the way, this is kind of interesting. This is the sign on this behind the stage where they put on this show to release them. And count the number of fingers on that hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sounds like Nephilim. Sounds like something biblical. And he got up, they did a thing in front of me. He says, listen, I just can't wait to go back to my wife and daughters. When he was there, he did not know. This is what he looked like before October 7th, what he looks like today on the right. And his wife and daughters were killed on October 7th. And he did not know that when he was released yesterday. He found out. And so all the claims that Israel is starving Gaza, somebody captured this picture, the Jewish prisoner hostage on the right, and this person celebrating in Gaza on the left, the Jewish guy, and on the right, somebody from Gaza. Here's all the guys together, juxtaposed with the picture from 80 years ago. Looks remarkably similar, does it not? Here's Aaron Moran, who used to be with Sky News, but I'll play a little clip of it. Sometimes she uses, I didn't have a chance to preview all of this, so I will apologize in advance. Sometimes she gets a bit direct with the language. It's nothing you haven't heard if you've been to an Ohio State football game. So here she is talking about what she saw.
You've all seen the images by now. You could put a black and white filter over the top and it's the Holocaust all over again. I don't even know where to start. To every single Jewish and Israeli person watching this right now, I am so sorry. I'm sorry that my voice has not been enough. That the other disgracefully small group of voices outside of your own have not been enough. We have all failed you. Humanity, again, collectively, has failed you miserably. And down the track, just like after World War II, yep, we know, there will be a reckoning. There always is. The masses will eventually wake up. They'll be horrified. They'll feel sick to the pits of their stomachs. But what does it matter? What difference will it make? Can't help you now. It doesn't save your daughters and sons and mums and dads. They'll never come back. And by the time you manage to muster, and I don't know how you do it, but by the time you manage to muster the unimaginable strength to just be a tiny bit okay, to recover in whatever way you can from the atrocities of the past year and a half, you do so knowing that if something like the Holocaust wasn't enough to stop October 7 from happening, not just that day, but the even worse events afterwards, then how the hell will October 7 be enough to stop the next one?
So Trump also called, you heard a little bit about that at the news conference with Netanyahu, about an Iran nuclear peace accord, but he's applying maximum pressure. Iran this week released pictures of a new drone carrier that they've launched. Now, there are reports from a German newspaper called Bild. I've not been able to confirm it anywhere else that the U.S. government has decided to release MOABs to Israel. MOABs sometimes referred to, it's a massive airborne ordnance, mother of all bombs. 21,000 pounds of explosives, difficult to deliver. Israel does have aircraft that could deliver it. It's usually B-52s, but it could be put on a pallet and shoved out of a big C-130 aircraft that Israel has some of. And it's a bunker buster called. I don't know but I haven't been able to confirm that they've been released. Israel's been asking them for a while, but this guy today said, look at all the stuff that the U.S. is now releasing to Israel. And, there's a big argument. Well, the Biden administration was slow walking it, some of us said. No, that's not true. Listen, they were slow walking it. Now those things are coming. I mentioned earlier that there's conflict. This is what Syria looked like. The red area, pinkish area would be the Syrian government. The blue area down here is the Golan Heights. Green area were the rebels. This was December 1st. This is what it looks like today. So there's still a lot of conflict up in this area. And my understand that they're taking Kurds out of the northeast of Syria and moving them someplace else. And then we also have the Golan Heights. This is what it looked like on December 1st. Israel has taken over some land. That's the demarcation line. There was a no man's land along that red line. And that's what they've taken over. So it's not that significant, but it's the high ground that's very strategically significant. Okay, so we'll talk more about this at the roundtable this week. AI, tech giants step up the pace of their AI spending spree. That was in the news just yesterday. And we also have the Greenland thing. Greenland is very strategically significant because it will shut off some sea lanes to Russia and China coming across the Arctic. So who knows? This is a concerning one. This is from the UK. Apple was ordered to let the Home Office in the UK get secret encrypted files from just people in the UK, right? Everybody in the world. The UK government. By the way, I saw a little video. In Russia last year, there were like 400 people charged, tried, in some cases sent to prison for what they posted on social media. In the UK, 3,500 people. One lady she got a year probation, couldn't leave her house except at certain times and all this stuff, because she posted a song of a friend of hers who got killed because it had some bad words in it. There's a massive thing going on in our government now with Doge, Elon Musk, these young guys that are going in, and they are creating tremendous databases, connections about where the money has gone. They've shut USAID down. There's litigation. There are like 35, 40 cases across the country now against the Trump administration. It's a bit chaotic. One judge, I believe he was a Reagan appointee, he should retire. He said the Secretary of the Treasury should not be, because he's a political appointee, should not have access to the databases. The Secretary of the Treasury, a judge said this. It's insanity. Now, whether you like what Musk is doing or not, I'm telling you, he's going forward, and there are people scrambling to delete things. Up in Canada, they have a foreign aid database, and it's been scrubbed. It's disappeared from the internet. I wonder why that is. By the way, this is a video of the bunker busters bombs dropped on Nasrallah's headquarters a couple months ago. Look at this. This is like one of the luckiest guys in the world. Got my coffee, going to get on my scooter, and yeah, I know. It's one of there are close calls in life. So PM and I, we were talking about one, we found an article in the LA Times about it. I'll talk about it some other time, but close call we missed by like half a minute to a minute. Explosion in San Francisco. We drove right by it. And it happened after we drove by it, so it's crazy. So FBI, firings push FBI into free fall, must move these agencies in chaos. And it's true. I mean, But all these people were working from home, and now they're locked out of their office. Like, well, we're locked out of our office. Well, you've never even been coming to the office for like 4 years. Nominees are getting done. So Trump did some good things. He banned trans in sports. USAID workers are shut down. As it says here, judge bars must team from having access to Treasury systems. The Secretary of the Treasury said you can have access to the system. The President of the United States says you can have access to the system. The Treasury is part of the executive branch of government. It is one of the 3 branches of our government. So I would just tell this judge, in a nice legal ease, judge, you need to butt out. Because you're not going to stop this. Even I saw like The Nation, a left-wing newspaper, said, we're like the chess club going to chess club and said, you guys aren't the chess club tonight, you're the football team. That's sort of what's going on. Jeffrey Tucker has a good article at Brownstone Institute, the most dramatic narrative shift in modern history. So here's Trump. Here's just some of the stuff he put in this week. Eradicating anti-Christian bias. I think this was very good. Talked about, look, we had a problem in the Bush administration. We're going to put a stop to that. We're putting a task force. But look, I will say this. I don't like what happened here. He established a White House faith office. If it was just to implement something to watch over the anti-Christian bias, I don't really like this faith office. I really don't like it that Paula White, a rank heretic, has been put in charge of it. That is a very bad sign. So tell the Trump administration that you don't like it. And here's the other thing. That's the appointments to the White House faith office, keeping men out of women's sports. By the way, look at this article from the Times UK. Children in wrong gender rises 50-fold over the last decade. 50-time increase. You tell me there's not something going on with people being indoctrinated the wrong way? And look at all these people out there protesting. It's crazy. Israel's doing anti-drone testing. Everybody's upset with Trump. So I'm going to read a couple paragraphs. This is the last thing I'm going to do today. Pam Haller approved me reading this. This was an article I found on Substack. Somebody sent it to me. I can't find where I found it, but I went to the Substack and I found it. And what the title is, it's called Override. Let me read just a little bit of this for you. And I'll post, when I get home from lunch today, I will post it in the show description. I sent it to my wife this morning. She said, wow, you need to read this. Because it's talking about what's going on. This is sort of this is what's going on in our government right now. Inside the revolution, rewiring American power. The clock struck 2 a.m. on January 21st, 2025. In Treasury's basement, fluorescent lights hummed among 4 young coders. Their screens cast blue light across government-issued desks, illuminating energy drink cans and agency badges. These are guys, by the way, my understanding is they're working for the government, but they're being paid they're being paid out of Elon Musk's own pocket. As their algorithms crawled through decades of payment data, one number kept growing. 17 billion in redundant programs and counting. We're in, one message to the team, all of it. Edward Korstein's code had already mapped 3 subsystems. By the way, these guys have been planning this for a long time. Remember all those meetings Musk was having down at Mar-a-Lago? By the way, they're calling it Gaza-Lago now. The plan. Anyway, Luke Farter's algorithms were tracing payment flows across agencies. Ethan Chartrand's analysis revealed patterns that career officials didn't even know existed. By dawn, they would understand more about Treasury's operations than people who had worked there for decades. This wasn't a hack. This wasn't a breach. This was authorized disruption. While career bureaucrats prepared orientation packets and welcome memos, the DOGE team was already deep inside the payment systems. No committees, no approvals, no red tape, just 4 coders with unprecedented access and algorithms ready to run. The beautiful thing about payment systems, noted a transition official watching their screens, is that they don't lie. You can spend policy all day long, but money leaves a trail. That trail led to staggering discoveries. Programs marked as independent reveal coordinated funding streams. Grants labeled as humanitarian aid show curious detours through complex networks. Black budgets, once shrouded in secrecy, began to unravel under algorithmic scrutiny. They're using AI. So I have real mixed feelings about this, but AI, there's a new sheriff in town right now, and I think I'm on board with that. By 6 a.m., Treasury's career officials began arriving for work. Okay, so they've been at work for what? 4 hours. 6 a.m., Treasury's career officials began arriving for work. They found systems they thought impenetrable already mapped, networks they believed hidden already exposed, power structures built over decades revealed in hours. Their traditional defenses, slow-walking decisions, leaking damaging stories, stonewalling requests proved useless against an opponent moving faster than their systems could react. Remember the analogy that the Nation left-wing magazine just said? The Treasury guys were the chess team arriving and told, you guys are the starting football team on Friday night. By the time they drafted their first memo objecting to this brief, 3 more systems had already been mapped. Pull this thread, a senior official warned, watching patterns emerge across DOJ's screens, and the whole sweater unravels. He wasn't wrong, but he misunderstood something crucial. That was exactly the point. This wasn't just another transition. This just wasn't another reform effort. This was the restart of something unprecedented, a revolution powered by preparation, presidential will, and technological precision. The storm had arrived, and Treasury was just the beginning. So you should get this. This is from EKO Loves You, Substack, called Override. Again, I'll put a link to it below. It's a fascinating read. It's really one of the more, it almost sounds like an episode of 24, but it's going on right now. So listen, I will tell you this. With Trump, Trump is a transactional guy. So be transactional with him. When he does something stupid, like appoints Paula White to the White House Faith Office, call him out on it, object to it, and tell him you think it's stupid. In that term, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's a theological nut. However, when he's doing something good to uncover corruption and that type of thing, banning trans women, pardoning people who were convicted of praying outside abortion clinics, and other people that were targeted by the Biden justice system, support that. That's good. So I have mixed feelings. I see him do Project Stargate. I'm concerned about that. But listen, and we'll talk about this Wednesday night. AI is not going to be stopped. I told somebody, I asked him the other day, a lawyer, I said, under what constitutional legal basis would you stop AI right now? No response, because I don't know what it would be. I mean, I suppose you could say some kind of harm to public health and welfare and that type of thing. But good luck with that against these billionaires and their teams of lawyers. It's not stopping. So the question is Trump pushing it because he wants to control everything, or is he trying to get involved in it to kind of put the brakes on it? The jury's out on that one. And by the way, I was a trial lawyer for 40-some years. And Bill, you know this, you're a lawyer too. The most stressful time in my life. I'll say this, PM sitting back there, was not anything that she ever did, or got mad at me or anything. That never stressed me out. But when you're in the courtroom and the jury is out, that's a very stressful time. And they always come back, Bill, I know you've had this, they always come back with this ridiculous question. All the lawyers are going like, what are they thinking? We've worked on this case for years. Well, the difference is, guys, they looked at it with fresh eyes and they think you missed something and you didn't explain something and it's bothering them. But the most stressful time is when you're sitting around the courtroom waiting for the jury and the bailiff comes in and says, we have a verdict. And from that moment until that verdict rests, it doesn't matter where you win or lose, that is just a heart-pounding time for every lawyer. So this is a heart-pounding time for everybody in the country because the jury is out on a lot of things. So where is all of this going is we don't know yet. And again, this is that gradually then suddenly thing that we're going to see in Bible prophecy and stuff as we get closer and closer to the end. It's going to accelerate, my ACLU, acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And we're all in the process of figuring it out. So hang on. We know eventually the Lord comes back, and we know that some of this stuff is so disruptive and the economy is teetering and things could change dramatically very quickly. None of us know exactly when that's going to happen. Listen, I've been listening to guys for 2 years. They were saying central bank digital currencies are coming in 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 weeks or 3 months. It's been over 2 years. So do I think they're coming? Yes. Do I know when? No. And nobody else does either. And by the way, Trump came out and said no central bank digital currencies in the United States. So that's good, right? So accept that as part of the transactional way to view him presently and view that way to everybody in the world. And there's disruption all over the place. Demographic problems, economic problems, political problems. There was a giant prison in Congo that got attacked by rebels and 4,000 people released and a couple hundred women raped and some killed by the prisoners. In the Congo, it's just crazy. But God's in control. Trust him. We're not supposed to be given the spirit of fear, right? So the takeaway from that is don't be fearful. Trust in the Lord. So let's pray. And by the way, I would highly recommend that you read this article just for informational purposes. Roundtable Wednesday night at 7, Thursday morning at 10 a.m. on anti-Semitism in Israel, the latter one. So let's pray. Lord, thanks so much for your word. We pray that you'll help us to be guided by your Holy Spirit in these days. Give us opportunities to share the gospel with people around us, because it is a time when people will be hurting and desperate and not really understanding what's going on. Give us understanding, wisdom, and not to be driven by fear. Bless us as we go. Give us opportunities to minister to those around us. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.